Welcome back to this coding challenge. In this case, you had to write a Python program that combines the first and the last three characters of a string. So for example, these three characters with these three characters to make a single string. And then you have to print that new string. So let's see how you can do that. I have two options for you, and one has a small improvement to this initial solution. First of all, since we want to print the first and last three characters, if the string has less than 6 characters, then that would not be a bad string in this problem. We don't want the characters to be overlapping, okay? If the string has less than 6 characters, then we just want to print an empty string, which will be displayed as a blank output when we run the code. How can we check if the length of the string is less than 6? Well, by writing this condition. We have the length of the string, and we compare that using the less than operator to the value 6. And if that is true, we print a blank output, just an empty string. We can also omit the empty string, but we can also specify it. It generates the same output. If that is not the case, if the string is valid, and it has more than 6 characters, or at least 6 characters, then we go to the else clause. And what are we going to do in this else clause? Well, we have to form the new string. How are we going to do that? Well, we are going to take the first 3 characters and the last 3 characters, and then we are going to concatenate them. When you use the plus operator in Python, you can join strings, which we call concatenate, and make a new string with all of those characters in order. Once we have the new string, we assign it to this variable and we print it. Let's see how this works behind the scenes with a diagram of the indices. Wonderful. And let's write the indices below, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Let's also write the length of the string. In this case, it is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. It is 9, okay? Right here we have the data that we need to understand how this part of the code is working. First of all, we're writing this to get the first 3 characters in the string. How are we doing that? We are using the default value for start. That default value is equivalent to writing this, from 0 up to 3 without including 3. Okay? This parameter, the stop parameter, is non-inclusive. So the character at index 3, which is this one right here, D, will not be included in the final slice. We are omitting this value, which is equivalent to writing 0. So we are going to start from the very first character in the string. We're going to start from W, then we are going to include the letter O, and finally the letter N. Because we are going to stop and not include the character once we reach index 3. We will have this part of the slice right here, which will correspond to this part. Let me add the comment right here so you can see what slice we will get from this particular expression. And after that, let me write it as a string, because this will be a string, like this. And then, with this particular expression, we are going to get the last 3 characters of the string. But we have to use the length function, because to get the last characters in the string, we will need to know how many characters are in the string. Right here, we know that there are 9 characters. So we can take 9 characters, right here, 9, the value 9, and subtract 3. 9 minus 3 is equal to 6. So we're going to start adding characters from index 6, like this, from F, and since we are using the default value for stop, we are going to continue until we reach the end of the string. We start from F, and then we continue all the way to the end of the string, because we are using the default value for stop, right here. When we write a value followed by a colon and then we just close the square bracket, we are using the default value for stop, which means that we want to include all the characters from that index up to the end of the string. This is the key part of this expression. We are using the length of the string to know how many characters are in the string, And then we are subtracting 3 because we want to get the last 3 characters in the string. That will result in the index where we have to start adding characters. In this case, 9 minus 3 is equal to 6, and that is correct. That will let us include the characters F, U, and L. So this will result in F, U, and L. Once we concatenate these two slices, these two strings, we will have a new string with the characters joined or connected or concatenated. And this will be our output, which is correct. This is exactly what we needed. Great, so now you know how this works behind the scenes. So let's delete these comments, save the file, and run our code. And we see this as the output. Wonderful. Great. Let's also test this with the string amazing. We get the correct output, AMA and ing. Exactly what we needed. Now let's see what happens if we write a string with only 4 characters. Remember that right here we are testing if the length of the string is less than 6. This will be true in this case. So let's run the code and we just see blank output, a blank output, because we are printing an empty string. The string was not valid, it has less than 6 characters, so this is true, and we print a blank output. Great, so now you know how this first option works behind the scenes. It's really cool, right? We are using string slicing to get 2 different portions of the string, then we are concatenating them, and we are generating a new string. Let's see our second option. Let me comment this out. And now we will go to our second option, which is really similar to our first option, with just one small modification. Right here. We still have the variable with the string, and now we see a new variable named number of chars or chars or number of characters. This variable represents the number of characters that we want to include from the beginning and from the end of the string. We wanted to include the first 3 characters and the last 3 characters. We are creating this variable because when you have a value that is repeated across your code, for example, right here we have the value 3, we have another value 3, and right here we have a value 6, that is twice the value 3, we can add context to our code by assigning it to a variable, and we can also make it easier for us to make changes to the code. For example, if we want to, instead of including just 3 characters, we want to include 4 characters, then we can change this value right here, and if we replace the value everywhere in our code where we need to use it, then we don't have to make any other changes. Right here, if we want to change this value 3, we have to change it in 3 different places. And if we forget to change one, that could be problematic. That will most likely generate a wrong output. But right here, we only have it once, in one particular place in our code. We update it once, and then that value will be used throughout our code. That is the advantage of defining a variable for this purpose. Great, so let's see how this impacts our code. We have the variable, and right here we replace the value 6 with the variable times 2. We can also add a space right here and surround it with parentheses. This is another alternative, or we can just omit the spaces right here. And right here, instead of writing 3 directly, we are using the variable, number of characters. So let's see that the program works as we expected, exactly like option 1 first. And then we will start experimenting and making some changes with the code. We see the output, WON and FUL, the first and the last 3 characters of the string. Now if we write the string amazing, we see exactly that. The first 3 characters and the last 3 characters. Awesome, so let's also test what happens if the string has less than 6 characters. We see an empty output because this condition was true. Instead of writing 6, we're just replacing this with the variable and multiplying it by 2. Great, now let's see what happens if instead of getting the first and the last 3 characters, we want to get the first and the last 4 characters. Okay? Let's see how easy it is to make this change when we have the number of characters defined as a variable. If we save the file and we run the code, now we see this. You can see that the code adapted perfectly with just one small change right here in this line of code. We have the first 4 characters right here, and we have the last 4 characters right here. And now, if we write a string that has less than 8 characters, we will see an empty output. Because the string is no longer valid, we need at least 8 characters to select the first 4 and the last 4 characters, without any one of them overlapping. Great, so now you know how to solve this coding challenge using these 2 options. It's always great to define a variable if you can detect that you are repeating a value that has the same purpose in your code multiple times. It will make the code easier to maintain and to update, and it will be easier to catch, detect, and fix bugs. Great! When you're ready, let's start working on the next coding challenge.